Governor Roy Cooper's state budget plan is reckless. So reckless that Joe Coletti has put together a three-part series of articles explaining how reckless it is. Joe is senior fellow at the John Locke Foundation. And Joe, your three-part series, each part says Governor Cooper's budget is reckless. Why is it reckless?
Starting with the just the overarching part of it, that the how much money he spends, how much money he leaves on the table, and the amount of debt, and just that it leaves the state in a much more vulnerable position than it should be, especially given where we're starting. So the state has $5 billion nearly in unreserved fund balance should have at the end of this year, and the governor and. So that should be something that we use for savings, to pay down debt, to take care of needs. It's one-time money that we can't count on in the future. The governor instead spends over the next 2 years. He spends all of that, and has recurring spending that caps out all of the recurring revenue that we have, and looks to take on $4.7 billion of debt, instead of using any of that money to pay for ongoing capital projects. So there's between the debt and the narrowness of the recurring spending and the lack of any kind of cushion for savings, for storms, for other natural disasters, or for an economic slowdown, which is still a possibility because of what the federal spending excess is looking like. All of that leads to North Carolina is going to be in a really vulnerable position in 2 years as a result of the governor's budget plans this year.
You make multiple references to this being a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Well, with that $5 billion that we have in unreserved fund balance, there is plenty of room for the governor to have put some money aside into the savings reserve, which is nowhere near what it should be. It's still about 5% because it was before the last round of storms and the earthquakes, we were up about $2 billion of savings reserve, the rainy day fund, as we call it. And this is a perfect opportunity to put aside $1 billion or $2 billion into that. This is a perfect opportunity to set aside money to take care of retirees in the future. This is a perfect opportunity to cut the state's debt and to provide capital to take care of capital needs. And the governor, instead of doing all of those things, is leaving the state in a much more vulnerable position.
In fact, you describe it in your report as fiscally fragile if the General Assembly went along with this idea, and putting the state at greater risk of layoffs and tax increases in the future. How so?
Well, as we've seen in previous recessions, when there is an economic downturn and the state does not have any kind of financial cushion, then we end up that we've seen Governor Perdue and Governor Easley in the past cut employees, furlough some, and raise taxes. In Governor Perdue's case, it was roughly $1 billion tax increase. She raised the sales tax by 1 penny, and that if we did that now, that would be about a $1.5 billion tax increase, and that goes to the poorest people in the state. And what we had this time, because we had a cushion, the state was able to not cut any employees and was able to not raise taxes, and instead they provided a small they provided a small check to families with kids in school to deal with everything. So we are in a much stronger position this time. If the governor were to spend as much as he does and to take on the debt, that would leave us right where we were in the previous two recessions, that state employees, state programs, and state taxpayers would be at risk of either being cut if there was their job or their program that was at stake, or having their pay cut by paying higher taxes.
The first part of your series gives an overview of why you believe the governor's budget is reckless. The second one gets into a lot more detail about what's in the governor's plan. We're not going to get into all of that detail, but is there something in particular you'd like to highlight?
Well, the governor is trying to make up for his past veto of previous budgets for the last 2 years, and even mini budgets that would have given state teachers and state school employees some raises. He's trying to use some money to provide an immediate bonus and then to provide long-term pay increases and COLA increases for state employees and state retirees. And instead of trying to shore those things up, he's trying to tack on more liabilities on that side. So it fits in with the reckless and dangerous kind of spending priorities.
Let's jump now to the last part of your series, and that is one in which, despite the fact that you have been telling us that the governor's budget is reckless, you do point to some good ideas in there, and then also turn back to one which you've already referenced that's a really bad one. Tell us what you see that's good and why you think this bond package is particularly bad.
Right. So among the good ideas, a couple of them have to deal with how the state deals with IT. And one of them has been referenced a few times in past budgets, which is if you're taking a look at we should how the state spends on IT, especially large software packages. Those should probably be treated as capital expenses because it's part of the infrastructure for state government, just same as buildings and same as roads. On the other hand, you have so many pieces of software have moved to subscription-based services, software as a service. And if you think about your Adobe, anything that you have from Adobe or your Microsoft Office suite, a lot of that now is subscription-based, and so you're constantly keeping updated. And that's one of the things that the auditor specifically mentioned is that she'd like to move the software that they use because not only is it that you have to stay up to date, but some of the things that they're looking at, they only need for a short period of time. So switch software to being more of a service and subscription and a recurring cost on that side. So if you can handle both of those would be two good options for the state. And another one in the software area is that at the community colleges have talked about creating regional cybersecurity offices. And this is not only good in this particular case, but I've been taking a look at Washington State and Oregon, where they have regional offices for school districts, and where those kind of back office things can be handled at a higher level. And that's something that North Carolina should probably take a look at for community colleges, for smaller cities, for smaller counties, for smaller school districts. How do we combine them in a way to be able to leverage the purchasing power, to be able to hire somebody who has the skills that are necessary at the salary that is necessary? Because there's a lot of demand and a lot of risk, especially in small places, of cybersecurity. We've already seen Durham and other cities in the state be shut down because of cyber attacks. Let's try to regionalize that, provide some more resources than can otherwise be afforded at a local level on those things.
So those are some good ideas. You also say along with the good, there's a big, terrible idea, and that is the bond package.
Yeah, the $4.7 billion bond package, instead of using some of the leftover money, the unreserved fund balance to pay down capital, the governor is instead looking at a $4.7 billion bond, arguing and justifying it based on the low interest rates today. But those low interest rates today, if you're paying any attention to the news, may not be here much longer because there is an increasing concern about inflation. And these bonds, right, they may get passed in November in a low turnout election, but they wouldn't be issued until potentially 5 or 6 years from now. And at that point, who knows what the interest rate is going to be, and that's the first thing that we have to pay. And so that means that there's greater potential for future tax increases or future program cuts, regardless of what happens with the economy and the recession that we were warned about earlier.
If you'd like to learn much more about this, you can go to johnlocke.org and find the research articles, 3 parts of them talking about why Governor Roy Cooper's budget is reckless. The author of the series is Joe Coletti, Senior Fellow at the John Locke Foundation. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Mitch.